I'm thankful to Harris for that prayer. Two things. He knows how forgetful that I really am. I'm sorry. And I tear things up. Also, he was in the car with Amanda and I the other day, headed down to Jackson, and she looked up the normal attention span of the adult male, and I think she said somewhere in 8 to 10 minute range, and so that was helpful as well. Thank you for coming back after lunch. I know you guys have a lot to do on Sunday afternoons, and I appreciate you being here, and I know that there's also a football game this afternoon. I suggest you don't watch it. They cheated my Cowboys out of a chance to play there, so the game is of zero importance now. But I just want to tell you guys before I get started, you're probably looking at the luckiest man on the earth. God has been so good to me. Jason's teaching the teenage class now, and they like him better. But when I do teach it, before we get started, we always say, what's your favorite thing? What's the best thing that has happened to you this week? And we all talk about that. And then we say, hey, that's a gift from God. And I do. I'm standing here realizing that all that I have, where I grew up, my family now, is all a gift from God, even me being here. And God has done so much for me. Has God done a lot for you guys? He has. He's done a lot for all of us. I have a lot of stories, and I've relayed them from time to time up here about what God has done for me. And this afternoon, that's kind of what I want to talk about this afternoon. Stories. Around Barrettville, we tell a lot of stories. Well, Papa Gene mostly tells a lot of stories. He tells these great Old Blue stories. Now, Old Blue, if you hadn't heard, if you don't know already, Old Blue is a mule. And Old Blue loves corn. Old Blue he's amazing. And these stories change with whatever situation that we happen to be in at the time. And Old Blue always saves the day. He always comes through, and then he always eats corn. I wish he'd put them in a book. He would sell a bunch of them, I think. I bet all of us have stories we like to tell. Maybe they're stories about things good that have happened to you. Maybe it's a cool place you went on vacation like the Smoky Mountains you want to talk about. Maybe it's a ball game you went to, or a sporting event, or whatever. We like to tell stories. I would imagine David and Kirk have fishing stories they like to tell. Probably 20% of them are true, but he still has stories he likes to tell with Kirk fishing. And Preston and Jason, he's probably my favorite person, almost, and I forgot his name, I'm sorry. But I bet you Preston and Jason have racing stories they like to tell. My favorite kind of stories this time of year are hunting stories, and most of my stories are true, but my favorite of those is each time, I'm sitting with the boys and they get their first deer. Boy, that's always my favorite stories, and I remember them. I remember everything that went on, and I love to tell those stories, and they're just great memories for me. My all-time favorite story that I tell, and I've told it up here 4 or 5 times probably, is the story about when I asked Amanda out the first time. I'm going to spare, and I'm not going to tell that story again, but that's my favorite story. But today I want to talk about better stories than that, even a lot better stories than that. Better than fishing, better than hunting, better than all of that. And I guess it's a better description of it, or more accurate, is accounts. I want to talk about accounts from God's Word. I'm going to call them stories, but they're more than stories. This is what actually happened. My first story I want to tell is pretty lengthy. It's about the Samaritan woman, her encounter with Jesus at the well. That's in John chapter 4. John chapter 4, starting in verse 5. Mark could get 15 lessons out of this, but I'm going to try to pull one out. John chapter 4, starting in verse 5, is fairly lengthy. So he came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near a plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealing with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, that I may not thirst nor come here to draw." Jesus said to her, "Go call your husband and come here." The woman answered and said, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You have well said, 'I have no husband.' For you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. In that you spoke truly." The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is spirit. Those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that the Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell all things." Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am him." This is the Samaritan's encounter with Jesus. This is her conversation. This is her story. This is what happened between her and Jesus. What was her reaction? What did she do with her story? Let's pick back up in 27. "And at this point the disciples came, and they marveled that he talked with a woman, yet no one said, 'What do you seek?' or 'Why are you talking with her?' Here's what she did. Then the woman left her water pot, went her way into the city, and said to the men, 'Come, see a man who told me all things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ?' Then they went out of the city and came to him." Her reaction was, she did take her story, and she did go back in the city and tell her about her encounter with Christ. That's what she did with it. What are the results of her story? Pick back up in 39. "And many of the Samaritans of that city believed in him because of the word of the woman who testified, 'He told me all that I ever did.' So when the Samaritans had come to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. And many more believed because of his own word. Then they said to the woman, 'Now we believe, not because of what you said, but we ourselves have heard him, and we know that this is indeed the Christ, the Savior of the world.'" Her encounter, she met Christ, had an encounter with him. She had a story to tell. She went and told the story and brought people to meet Christ. It's simple as that. Another story is over in Luke. Luke 7, when Jesus raised the dead man. Luke 7, verse 11. Now it happened the day after that he went into a city called Nain, and many of his disciples went with him, and a large crowd. And he came near the gate of the city. Behold, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the city was with her. When the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said to her, "Do not weep." Then he came and touched the open coffin, and those who carried him stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." So he who was dead sat up and began to speak, and he presented him to his mother. Then fear came upon all, and they glorified God, saying, "A great prophet has risen up among us, and God has visited his people." And this report about him went throughout all Judea and all the surrounding region. These people at this funeral procession had an encounter with Christ. They had a story to tell. What did they do? They just simply went and told their story, and they glorified God. One page over into Luke chapter 8. Starting in verse 26, when Jesus cast out the demons. Then they sailed to a country of the Gardanians, which is opposite Galilee. And when he stepped out on the land, there met him a certain man from the city who had demons for a long time. He wore no clothes, nor did he live in a house, but in tombs, among the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out, fell down before him, and with a loud voice said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man, for it had often seized him, and he was kept under guard, bound with chains and shackles. And he broke the bonds and was driven by the demon into the wilderness. Jesus asked him, saying, "What is your name?" And he said, "Legion," because many demons had entered him. And they begged him that he would not command them to go out into the abyss. Now a herd of many swine was feeding there on the mountain. So they begged him that he would permit them to enter them, and he permitted them. Then the demons went out of the man and into the swine, and the herd ran violently down the steep place into the lake and drowned. When those who fed them saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. And they went out to see what happened, and came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had departed, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. They also, who had seen it, told them by what means he who had been demon-possessed was healed. Then the whole multitude of surrounding region asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear, and he got into the boat and returned. Now the man from whom the demons had departed begged him that he might be with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your own house and tell what great things God has done for you." And he went his way and proclaimed throughout the whole city the great things Jesus had done. The demon-possessed man again had an encounter with Jesus. And he had a story to tell. And he went and told his story. A few weeks ago, I was with a group of these guys, and we were out somewhere, and we were playing this game. Ask Kirk next time you see him what this means, and where's Preston? I still don't know what that means. But anyway, we were having a good time, and it was time for preacher to do a Devo, so he was asking everybody what their favorite verse is. Mine's John 14, 1 and 2, if you want to know. But we kept on talking, and the story turned and got to the question about sharing the gospel. Because certainly we know that is our number one job of ours, is to share God's word. And I'll be the first to tell you, I don't do it enough. I promise you, I just don't. I want to more, but I don't. Why don't we? I just came up, things off the top of my head. I'm sure y'all have a ton more about some reasons, maybe some personal reasons that I don't. I don't speak well enough. That's a good excuse. You know, it wasn't an excuse for Moses, and that's certainly isn't a good excuse for us. You don't have to speak well to share the gospel. I get nervous, and I do. I get nervous when I try to approach somebody. Take somebody with you that will help you, that will make you more comfortable. Pick somebody that you know loves you, and start there. Here's a big one, a huge one. I don't know enough, and I don't know enough. Guess what, guys? It's open book. You don't have to know everything. You just don't. We have some really great literature here that has a card on it. It's a card or a book that has every topic that you could ever want to imagine. Not every, but a lot of topics. And it doesn't give man's opinion. Nobody cares about my opinion. I've lived long enough to figure that out. But this is straight Bible verses. That's all it is. It's a topic and a Bible verse. And I'll tell you, we're talking about telling stories. I'll tell you a little of my story. I won't tell you much of it, but I'll tell you this part of it. Most of you already know it. I didn't come from a background, from the church background. And when I met Amanda, I wasn't attending very often, maybe once, twice a year. But I knew if I wanted to see her again, that this is where I would be on Sunday mornings. But I remember after we were married, we were sitting there, and she would just hand it to me and say, "You read it. You read it." It's hard to deny that, because she knows way more than I do about the Bible, but all she did is tell me to read it. You can do that. I can do that. We can do that. Another reason, and it gets a little less, but especially for these teenage guys and girls, my friends will pick on me. No, they won't. Wait a minute. Yes, they will. They might. But that's okay. When I was in school, there was a guy that I went to school with that he was a really good guy. And you can tell by the way he lived that Jesus was important to him. And I promise you, he got way more respect than most other people. People were drawn to him because of the way he acted. We call it living in the circle. The kid in class kind of came up with some things. Big circle on the board, and these are the characteristics of you if you serve Christ. And we wrote them down inside the circle. If you want to follow Christ, this is the way you act inside this circle. Some things they said was be a servant, put others first, be kind, be generous, truthful, faithful, and trustworthy. That's just some of the things that I remember that they put inside the circle. This guy was all those things, and people were drawn to him. And Mark alluded to this a little bit this morning. You act like this. You live in the circle, and people will be drawn to you, and you'll have more opportunity. Are we living in the circle? Sometimes yes, sometimes not as much. I asked you a few minutes ago, has God done anything for you? I bet He has. I bet you have a story. Everybody has a story. I know a lot of y'all's stories. If you live your life in the circle, you'll have opportunity to tell your story. Somebody wants to know about God. You think somebody needs to know about God. We have all had an encounter with Jesus. It's simple, guys. Tell your story. Tell your story at work, by the way you live, by the way you act. Guys, tell your story at school, by the way you treat others. We are instructed It's not an option that we tell our story, that we bring folks to Christ. Tell your story in your words and in your action and in everything you do. Tonight, I know you got a story. A lot of times I forget my story. I forget all the things that God has done for me. And I forget to live my life like it's all God. It's like everything I have is a gift from God. And it is. Tonight, if you've forgotten your story, or if we can help you in any way, come as we stand and sing.